There's so many people who make the New American Speakers Program possible. That includes Basma Alawi, the founder of Weave Tales, who is here on the call today. It also includes Marwa and so many others who are making this call possible. Victor, who is helping us with the text. Like, there are so many people who have invested in giving you all the best night possible. And it wouldn't be possible if you weren't here. So thank you so much. The theme for tonight's storytelling event is storytelling as a source of strength. And I think that using our voices and our stories is as important now as ever. Especially as we continue witnessing the detriments of genocide and violence in places like Sudan, the Congo, Tigray, Haiti, and Palestine. I also want to let you know that some of the stories that will be shared tonight are difficult to hear, right? A lot of times people want to focus on just the happy stories, but some of the stories that will be shared tonight will be hard. The goal of sharing stories is sometimes to vent, to connect with others, to process what we're going through. So I want to invite you to hold space to do all of these things or whatever feels okay to you tonight. But I also invite you to take any breaks that you might need because it's not easy to hear stories, especially that resonate with some of the hard experiences you've had. So I hope that we have some laughs, some joy, but also some tears and some help of being in community together and processing the many things that people are going through. So without further ado, I want to open by introducing you all to our keynote speaker, whom I've invited to share a little bit with tonight. Let me just get him up here. So our keynote speaker tonight is Kevin Artiga, who holds a bachelor's degree in English and political science and a master's degree in English from the University of Florida. He has worked in the medical, software, and cultural resource management fields as a technical communicator. His doctoral studies focus on scientific technical communication, digital humanities, and media studies. And on a personal note, Kevin is doing some really interesting research about migration policy. And I just think he serves as such a great example for the way that immigrants and refugees, impact our entire culture. So without further ado, I'd like to go ahead and welcome Kevin.
Hi, could everyone hear me? Okay. Thank you, Dr. Gonzalez, for the invitation, and thank you all for who organized this event. And I want to thank Weave Tales for this amazing program. And I've watched a lot of the videos of everyone participating in the program, and I recognize that many of you have embarked on taxing journeys in a way like continuing a timeless human tradition, the quest for new horizons. Throughout our history as human beings, we've embraced the freedom to move, oftentimes driven by many reasons: escaping hardship, seeking opportunities, a lot of times like a blend of both. But this spirit of resilience and hope is a testament to a very special form of power. Sometimes we need to remember that moving to a new place and learning a new language, embedding yourself into a new culture, familiarizing yourself with different customs, that is not for the faint of heart. And a lot of times it's also not a choice. So when we find ourselves in these situations, it's important to remember that we are expressing a form of power. We are resisting a type of powerlessness. We are striving, hoping, praying, and trying. And surprisingly, this is enough. It might not seem like enough, but it is. I moved to the United States when I was very young, around 4 or 5 years old. I was born in El Salvador. I left the country in the midst of an extreme crisis. El Salvador was recovering from a devastating civil war, had limited infrastructure, scarce opportunities, a high rate of violence. I grew up in Miami, Florida, where everyone I knew was an immigrant from somewhere, mostly from Latin America and the Caribbean, but we had people from all over the world. Sometimes I think my experience in the United States, especially after moving, or my experience in Miami, especially after moving to an area where there aren't as much immigrants, in a way gave me a sort of privilege. And I talk about this as privilege because, sometimes when we talk about privilege, and we think of it as something other people have, something we don't have, I think it has like a pernicious effect. It makes us, maybe in like some kind of unconscious way, blind to the treasures that we have. And I want to talk a little bit about those treasures, those stories, sometimes of hardship, those difficulties, those traumas. They are a source of something. I don't want to say they're positive because they could be excruciatingly painful. When I was 19, I was diagnosed with cancer. I was an immigrant with an unstable immigration status, a challenge I'm still facing to this day. Dealing with the immigration system has been a constant struggle throughout this journey. But when I got cancer, in a way, it was like I've kind of forgot that I lacked US citizenship. I started to care about living. And it was not a positive experience. It wasn't positive for me, nor for my family. It was painful. But even now, 10 years later, and I'm okay, alive, I'm still here, I look back at that experience and I think of the kid who I shared a room with. He had a much more serious cancer than I did. And I was still like a teenager, an older teenager, but I had to do my treatment at a children's hospital. And he was younger than me. He was like 11 years old. And I remember at 19 listening to his mom cry at night while he slept because of his diagnosis. And those type of painful experiences, they change you. I survived my cancer, but not everyone did, and not everyone does. And I learned, in 19 that this was a feature of life. And it was so bizarre because once I was better, I remember hanging out with my friends who were all like my age, I just felt very different than them because I had that experience. They were like 18, 19, but they lacked something I did not lack. It was something nuanced. I don't want to call it maturity because I was still very immature, but maybe perspective, maybe that's it, a different sense of perception. And I'm sure many of you feel this as well. Your experiences give you a different sense of seeing. Having cancer even made me think differently about my other issues, like my immigration status or my income level, or being gay in a very macho culture. It just changed my perspective, my vision. Not my ability to see from my eyes, but my ability to see. And, again, this was all in Miami. It's a very like non-white space. All of the public schools I went to were majority Hispanic or Black. I grew up around immigrants of all kind, and growing up, this diversity to me was a true diversity. Everyone's very different. People disliked each other. Venezuelans and like Colombians, if you weren't Cuban, a lot of resentment to Cubans, except the Cubans who also didn't like a lot of people. But we all lived together. We all worked together. We all played together. People thought very differently than each other. It was not a utopia, but weirdly enough, it kind of was, especially now that I live in a much less diverse place. It wasn't a place without conflict. There was a lot of conflict. There still is, but that is diversity. Diversity is not seamless. And this is what I mean when I say a change in vision and perception. Precisely through the experiences that were the most challenging, the most traumatics, the ones that brought out the most difference, the most conflict, the most pain. Those are the ones that changed my vision, my perspective. And in a way, this is my privilege. I'm able to speak and see in other ways that others cannot. And one of the most, and this might seem unrelated, but I promise it's not, one of the most important public speaking advice I ever received was not to care about when you make a mistake or mispronounce a word or stutter or when your accent comes out. And I think this is similar to what I'm talking about. It's like no one notices the stutter, the mispronunciation more than you do. You in the way care the most about it. No one else really cares. And that's why good public speaking is not perfect public speaking. That's why the best stories are the ones that have pauses, mistakes, and breaks. The best stories are the ones that make the accent come out, And I think that's what we have, the ability to tell our stories with all the pauses, mistakes, and breaks. Storytelling is one of those other traditions, like the freedom of movement, that makes us us. And those breaks, those mistakes, and the pauses in our lives that brought us where we are, that is privilege, that is power. Or at least that's like what I try to tell myself. Thank you.
Wow, Kevin, thank you so much for sharing that, all of that. And it resonates so much with what we've been talking about in the course in terms of, yeah, having a different perspective and connect.